my pleasure to be the host here today. Just a reminder that we are recording the session today. And what we're going to have today is we're going to have 3 short presentations, 10 minutes each, from some experts in the field, both from FortisAlberta, ATCO Electric, and from the Municipal Climate Change Action Center, an arm of a branch of the Alberta Municipalities. And then there'll be time for questions afterwards. So if you could just hold your questions till the end and type them in the chat, and then Nancy, one of our talented staff members at the EDA, will moderate the Q&A when we get to that point. So we're going to be hearing from Calvin Lechelt from the MCCAC, Michael Simone from FortisAlberta, and William York from ATCO Electric. Just some brief bios in advance, and then we'll let the guys launch into their presentations. So Calvin joined the MCCAC and the Alberta Municipalities in 2017 and currently leads the Action Center's renewable energy, energy efficiency, and electric vehicle rebate programs for municipalities across Alberta to reduce energy use and emissions. And Calvin is passionate about the electrification of transportation and strives to make a positive difference in the transition to net zero. He's been a huge help to Southgrow as we've launched our own rebate program for installations across the province, and I'm very happy to have him here today. Michael Simone is a new contact for myself. Michael's a manager of operations engineering at FortisAlberta. He's an electrical engineer with 16 years of experience in the field, and in recent years has worked in the development of new distributed energy resource interconnections standards to meet the increase in demand for large DER facilities. He also pursues opportunities to help facilitate the shift to transportation electrification. Thank you for being here today, Michael. And William York, I've had the pleasure of knowing for quite a few years now, too. He's a senior engineer at ATCO Electric in charge of leading the company's EV strategies and projects. William's worked extensively in the industry and also a longtime director with the Electric Vehicle Association of Alberta. He's represented ATCO on such important files as the Peak to Prairie's electric vehicle charging network that Southgrow was pleased to be part of. And he's always a source of advice and information for those of us who are feeling our way forward blindly in this rapidly changing sector. Thanks for being here today, William. So in that order, guys, 10 minutes each. Calvin, Michael, and William, please share your knowledge and wisdom with us, and we'll hold the questions till the end. Please, again, type your questions in the chat as they occur to you. Take it away, guys.
Awesome. Thanks, Peter. Can I just get a thumbs up? Everyone can see my presentation slides. Awesome. Yeah, well, I just want to start with thanks to EDA, Nancy, and Peter for providing the opportunity for us to come and share a little bit about the opportunities that we're providing in the electric vehicle space. So for those who may not be familiar with the Action Center, we were established in 2009 as a collaborative initiative between the Alberta municipalities, the rural municipalities of Alberta, and the government of Alberta. And our mandate is to provide funding, technical assistance, and education to Alberta communities to help them in addressing climate change. As Peter mentioned a little bit, some of our programs have included rebates for solar installations, energy efficiency upgrades, energy manager staffing grants, and a variety of EV initiatives that we're going to be focusing on today. So yeah, obviously going to focus the presentation around the opportunities that surround EV adoption, mostly with a focus on municipalities, but there's a handful of opportunities for businesses and nonprofits and just generally other organization types. But first off, I just wanted to share kind of why this is a core conversation that's kind of popping up all over the news lately. And it's mostly around a lot of the targets that are being set around electrification of transportation. And that helps explain kind of why this shift is happening. So emissions, broadly speaking, from the transportation sector make up about 25% of Canada's overall emissions. And so as a result, emission reductions in this sector are pretty key to Canada, but certainly other countries around the world in making or in meeting their climate targets. In Canada specifically, the federal government has set a target of 100% zero emission vehicle sales by 2035 and is aiming to have 50,000 EV chargers nationwide by 2026. So these are not actually that far. These are targets not set too far into the future. So that's kind of what's happening on the government side of things, but manufacturers are certainly following suit. a lot of manufacturers have targets to phase out the production and sales of new internal combustion engine vehicles in various timelines, anywhere as early as 2030 and generally as late as 2040, so that whole decade. So that brings us to the opportunities that fall within these three categories. So vehicles, infrastructure, and education. Starting with vehicles, the Action Center provides funding through the Electric Vehicles for Municipalities program that I'm going to talk about in a little bit more detail. But municipalities and other organization types and even private residents can access the incentives for zero emission vehicles, or IZEV program, through the federal government, and also the recently announced incentives for medium and heavy duty zero emission vehicles. On the infrastructure side of things, we have our electric vehicle charging program that I'm going to get into more detail on. And this is a collaboration with Natural Resources Canada and the South Row Regional Initiative. And then around education, for municipalities specifically, as a component of our Electric Vehicles for Municipalities program, we offer fleet feasibility studies. So you can get 50% up to $6,000 for a fleet feasibility study that will help your municipality determine where within your fleet is the best opportunity to transition to EVs. What does that look like in terms of infrastructure? What should you expect for savings? Just generally building that business case. And then a little bit more on the community side of things, the federal government offers the Zero Emission Vehicle Awareness Initiative. So if you are with a municipality and you want to build that education within your community, it's generally more community focused. There is funding available for that as well. To start out, just want to get into a little bit more detail on the Electric Vehicles for Municipalities program. So we launched this in March of 2019, so fairly early on. Doesn't actually seem like that long ago, but with the rate of technology evolution in this space, it also feels like a long time. So we offer funding for 3 different vehicle categories, specifically for municipalities, anything from light duty vehicles to medium heavy duty and non-road vehicles. And you can see the rebate structure on the screen there. Again, the feasibility studies as well. Just want to highlight that in the light duty and medium heavy duty streams, our funding is stackable with the funding offered by the federal government. So on the light duty side of things, you could get up to $19,000 off a new EV, which in most cases either completely removes the incremental cost or brings the upfront cost of an EV lower than that of a brand new internal combustion engine vehicle. So certainly encourage folks to leverage that. Really quick, just want to share an example of one municipality that participated in the program. The city of Medicine Hat received $28,000 for both, or in total, for a Chevy Bolt and a Hyundai Kona. One interesting use case here is that Hyundai Kona on the right-hand side is actually used for photo radar and doesn't idle at all, and completely eliminates the fuel waste around having a photo radar vehicle just sitting there, trying to keep the driver warm, right? So that's an interesting use case that they're certainly going to save a good amount of fuel costs on. And there goes my light. There we go. Occupancy sensors, they get you. Keeping on with the Electric Vehicles for Municipalities program, we've supported about 96 vehicles in the various categories. Notably and kind of interestingly, and to us, not exactly something we were expecting, a lot of participation in the non-road category. So that includes things like, I've broken out ice resurfacers here, but we generally include those in that category. But things like riding mowers, golf carts for municipally owned golf courses, side-by-sides for patrol of campgrounds and things. It's pretty diverse. So that's been an interesting outcome, and pretty diverse amount of municipalities participating as well. And just last point on the EVM program, just want to share with everyone that the participation deadline has been extended to March 31st of 2023. So you still have some time. Funding is limited, so we really encourage folks, if this is something they're looking at, just to reach out to us. We can have a conversation if timelines are tight for you, especially when it comes to receiving a vehicle. There's obviously a lot of supply issues in the world right now, and we can try to be as accommodating as possible. Shifting gears to the electric vehicle charging program. This is an offering in collaboration with the South Row Regional Initiative and Enercan, as I mentioned previously. This is open right now and offers 46% funding up to $100,000 per applicant, and is not just for municipalities. We would welcome participation from businesses, obviously municipalities, but also nonprofits, Indigenous communities, institutions. It's pretty diverse in that respect. We previously offered a stream for municipalities at 100% funding, and that is now fully subscribed. I just want to talk a little bit about the community benefits from EV charging. We hear a lot from our participants about the variety of factors that kind of encourage them to install EV charging specifically for public use. And the things we consistently hear are that municipalities and communities generally think it's a great economic development opportunity, bring people into their town, have them spend a little bit of money as they're waiting for their vehicle to charge, but it kind of changes the model as compared to a gas station. Gas stations a lot of time are kind of on the outskirts of a town. You don't really need to go into the downtown core or explore that community. But with the distributed nature of EV charging, that is starting to shift. So you can really show off your town, and that's what a lot of communities are looking to do with some of this funding, but also encourages tourism, supports climate and EV uptake targets, and certainly future-proofs their operations on the fleet side. So as I mentioned, the 100% funding stream that was only for municipalities through the electric vehicle charging program has since closed. Just wanted to share a little bit of stats on what we saw from that program. But these stats actually include both streams, so the South Grow stream and the 100% funding stream. So we've seen about 132 new stations planned throughout Alberta, and you can see the breakdown as to what types of power outputs between level 2 and level 3. If you're not familiar, the difference there is just generally the speed at which we can get electricity into the battery, with the higher outputs, 100 kilowatts plus, just being a lot faster to do that. 87% so far from what we've seen are for public use, so that's great. Also still supporting, fleets, but certainly there's been more of an emphasis on the public side. And we still have about 1.6 million available through the South Grow stream. So if this is piquing your interest, really recommend that you reach out to us, go to our website, submit an expression of interest, and our team can get in touch with you to talk about a potential project. The distribution of the charging infrastructure is very important as well. So I just want to share quickly what the existing network looks like on the left-hand side and what we are supporting on the right-hand side. So there's still certainly gaps in the charging network, even after what we're supporting on the right. But we are filling gaps. Happy to see that we're filling gaps, certainly in the Edmonton area, but we do need more, certainly north of Edmonton, but also west and east, and even to the bit of the southeast portion of the province. And that's what we're looking to do with some of our remaining funding. And with that, I thank everyone for their time, and I'll pass it back to Peter.
Thanks, Calvin. Yeah, we'll move on without any further ado to Michael Simone from FortisAlberta. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. I don't have, I guess, a formal presentation to kind of walk through, but I do have a bunch of points, talking points, kind of around the opportunities, challenges, and solutions. But one thing I'll pop up just so people have kind of an understanding of who FortisAlberta is. I'll just share kind of a slide here. Okay. I don't know if everybody can see my screen.
We can see it.
Yeah, you're good.
So FortisAlberta, we're a distribution company that services most of southern Alberta. The kind of lighter blue is ATCO service territory. So Will from ATCO, kind of that's the the service territory that they look at. So we have we provide power to 700 or 500 roughly 1,000 customers. There's a lot of distribution line that we look after, but there's going back to the map that we saw from PlugShare before, there is a lot of charging networks that have been established through the the corridor, the I guess corridors between larger cities and everything like that, especially in the south. And so we do service a lot of those customers, and yeah. So let me just get into. So kind of I guess the opportunities that we see, I'm probably going to reiterate kind of what everybody has talked about before, or a lot of people on the call here probably know about, the differences in level 3 chargers and level 2 chargers. But there's a fairly large importance to the destination chargers versus the en route chargers for customers that are driving EVs, or the ones that want to kind of pursue and purchase EVs in the future. And so that's where we're kind of looking at supporting and making sure that our infrastructure kind of can suit the needs for those level 3 chargers that are en route. And when you get to that destination, those level 2 chargers that potentially a customer would need to get to that location. Technically, there are different ways that we can look at the kind of technical challenges that we have in our system, but I don't want to necessarily focus on that, just because we can get really down to the technical challenges of looking and making sure that everybody can get connected at their house. But I think the larger thing that we're looking at right now is making sure that we can provide the kind of education that we need to people that want to connect to our system. So for FortisAlberta, we're definitely looking to connect more with our customers, and that could be from the level 2 side of things, but specifically level 3 as well. There are some large technical requirements that we're looking at that have challenges to connect to that system, and not really knowing kind of what those load requirements are going to be for consumers that want to establish a level 3 charger kind of at their location. I think there are large questions around where those chargers need to be in order to provide kind of the best experience for consumers, and what that makes sense. And I think the market will establish that kind of moving forward. And the kind of regulatory structure around, if a town or city wants to make sure that they do have that level of support for the consumers that want to come to their area, and making sure that there are regulatory structures and rates for the equipment that they want to install that makes sense. So if it's a smaller community that might not have enough demand at first, we're looking at different kind of rate structures to make sure that initially, we don't want to burden them with very large costs to just operate a level 3 charger within an area. And so there's challenges there that we see And so we're looking at kind of different opportunities to say, maybe there is a range of different rates that make sense today versus tomorrow and kind of down the road. So we can add that flexibility. That's kind of the larger struggle that we've seen, especially for level 3 charters. And making sure that the demand side of things, I think, depending on how you, like what consultants you go to and who you approach, I think the education aspect of it is getting better, because a lot of these newer systems do have managed charging on their side. So if you are looking at installing a level 3 charger, multiple level 3 chargers, a lot of that work can be done kind of upfront. There are obviously costs associated with that. And so like that's the largest thing that we're looking at to kind of make sure that we support kind of today and moving forward. Some things that we're looking at in the future here, for transit specifically, there is a program that we're looking at for 2022 where we're supporting feasibility studies for municipalities to better understand what the impacts are of converting their electric converting their fleet today to different phased approaches of what that might look like for kind of a greener transit. So that might be electric vehicles, that might be hydrogen vehicles. We're working with organization called Kutrick that's based in the east in Toronto, and so they're helping us kind of they're basically helping us fund this feasibility study, and they kind of have that expertise on what that looks like. And so, we're reaching out to, or we've reached out to multiple municipalities that are in our service territory to see, if they want to, be a part of this study, to just basically help them understand what that might look like and what they might have to do in the future, what the requirements would be in the future to kind of convert their vehicles to electric or to hydrogen, depending on what makes sense. There's different criteria that would specify, if it makes sense to convert one electric or one diesel bus today to an electric bus in the future. And so understanding that through a feasibility study is fairly important, because a lot of the times municipalities aren't actually pursuing that just because of that upfront cost. And so we're looking at supporting that for this year and hopefully providing that report next year. And yeah, kind of like, I guess, I don't know, I don't want to get necessarily too much into the technical requirements of things. I really want to open this up for discussion later. We do have a fairly good, one of our colleagues is on the call here. And so we do have a fairly good website or portal for anybody who has questions related to electric vehicles. They can go to our website, and I don't know if I should just pull this up here. I can do that later and provide that link. But we do have a corporate website that has a whole bunch of information on electric vehicles, or all the way up to kind of what the savings are going to be when you purchase an electric vehicle. But I won't get too much of that. I'm really looking forward to kind of the discussion that and questions that people have after. So I'll kind of leave it at that. But I just wanted to keep things kind of just to be more interactive later on.
Thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate that. And we'll move on to our last presenter, William York from ATCO.
Hey.
You have the floor, sir.
Okay, let me just share my screen. Yeah, that should work. If I switch into presentation mode, everyone should be able to see this, correct? Everyone seeing my presentation?
Yes. Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Okay. All right. Just in the interest of time, I will kind of flip quickly through these slides. So basically, ATCO, we are pointing the ship at the transitioning the world to cleaner energy. We have a presence in over 100 countries. We do things that even I don't really know much about. We are in some major businesses, major sectors of the economy: energy, real estate, housing, modular workforce housing, and worksite office trailers. We do logistics and transportation, agriculture, and water solutions. A little bit about me. I'm a senior engineer with EV Services. I was the head engineer on Peaks to Prairies, other EV infrastructure deployments that we've done throughout the province, mainly turnkey installations for others. And I'm also a qualified consultant with MCCAC's Electric Vehicles for Municipalities program. So what Calvin was talking about earlier, I've led some studies for municipalities across Alberta. I'm also a director of the Electric Vehicle Association of Alberta. We are a nonprofit. Our goal is to advance sustainable transportation through raising awareness, education, and advocacy. And I'm also an EV driver, so I've driven about 80,000 pure electric kilometers since procuring an electric vehicle in June of 2018.
William, I don't mean to interrupt. Is there a way to make your presentation full screen? There's a sort of an icon or a thumbnail that's interrupting the slide.
Okay, sure. Let me just.
Oh, that's better. Yeah, thank you. That's great.
Is this better?
Yeah, that's much better. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so this is a snapshot of the distribution of EV ownership in the province of Alberta. This is data as of March 31st, 2021. The province still hasn't updated the March 31st, 2022 numbers, but we know that as of that date, there were approximately 3,500 battery electric vehicles, so that's pure electric, no gasoline whatsoever, registered in the province of Alberta. The highest concentrations are, no surprise, in Edmonton and Calgary. Those are the darkest blue zones on the map that's shown here to the right of the slide. And rural Alberta has the lowest concentrations. But southern Alberta has among the best concentrations in the rural areas. So that's a good story for Fortis and for ATCO's service territory in that region of the province. That means that electricity consumption is going up and that people are driving electric vehicles there. So adoption will increase as more models come to market. Automaker production volumes are still very supply constrained. Lithium and other critical minerals are hard to get your hands on right now, and there's just so much demand for electric vehicles and grid-sized battery energy storage systems that the supply chain is having a hard time ramping up the supply. But I see nothing but massive swaths of investment going forward to help meet the demand. And the federal government of Canada has set a mandate of 100% of new vehicle sales to be zero emission vehicles by 2035, with interim targets of 20% by 2026 and 60% by 2030. Just talking a little bit about ATCO's involvement in electric vehicle fast charging infrastructure. Peaks to Prairies is a project that we executed in 2019. The last station went in 2020. Each site has one fast charger and one level 2 charger. The fast charger is a 50 kilowatt charger and the level 2 is 7 kilowatts. Our highest usage stations are in major cities. So all of our Calgary ones, Lethbridge, Medicine Hat, those are all getting fantastic usage. And our lowest usage stations are along the highway corridors located in small municipalities. And I won't target anybody specifically, but the reasons for those charging stations getting used less is that there's less traffic through those areas. And that's basically the gist of it. The average energy delivered per charge is about 20 kilowatt hours. To give that bring that number home for you and give it a realistic comparison, that's about what your home uses in a single day. The average Albertan home uses in a single day. So 20 kilowatt hours is about that much. In 2021, we had approximately 1,400 unique users use the network. The average dwell time is about 35 minutes. So what Calvin was saying earlier about economic stimulation in these towns where you put a fast charger downtown, you got a person from out of town who's doing something for 35 minutes. That could be visiting the local museum or the coffee shop or the local bank. Any one of those things could be getting done in those 35 minutes. The average dwell time for the level 2 charger is quite a bit longer. It's about an hour and 20 minutes. So that's also something to consider. But if you're looking at somebody that's just traveling through your town, like let's say you are Nanton, they'll probably stop at the level 3 charger before they stop the level 2 charger, unless they're doing some kind of business there and staying at the at Nanton for longer than a couple of hours. In that case, if it were me, I would use the level 2 charger. The top 4% of users use 20% of energy and are 25% of the session. So we do have some heavy users, and the top 20% use 50% of the energy. So there is a class of EV drivers that are heavy drivers, and they're the ones that we need to focus on. Many EV drivers just end up using their vehicle for commuting around town. And in fact, 90% of energy usage with electric vehicles is home charging. So only 10% of charging is done away from the home. And our Peaks to Prairies network just crossed an amazing milestone. As of this year, we've delivered over 1 million emission-free kilometers using the Peaks to Prairies network. Just looking at energy growth here, highlighted in red is this year's energy delivery to our customers. And you can see that August was a record-breaking month by a high margin. And August and September, actually every month this year, has just completely blown all other months out of the water. When we look at year-over-year growth of this network, we rarely see anything under triple digits. So it's just phenomenal, the growth that we're seeing here. The only one sore spot is July of 2020. We saw negative growth, and that was due to, you guessed it, COVID. So aside from that, we have a spectacular network performance and growth. Fast chargers do have a seasonality to them. So there is a bit of a summer peak and a winter lull, but overall, due to the growth of electric vehicles, you're seeing nothing but growth year over year. Just to give you a sense of the landscape of DCFC sizing in Western Canada, these are all the major players and their respective sizes. So ATCO, Flow, Co-op, we tend to install on the lower range of the fast charging spectrum, whereas Petro-Canada, Electrify Canada, and Tesla are installing on the higher end of the spectrum. And this really boils down to the business case and how much capital you have to deploy these fast chargers. I think there is a size for every application. 50 kilowatts seems to be really good when you're looking at shopping malls or downtown centers where the dwell time is acceptably long, I'll say. 150 kilowatt should be the bare minimum for any highway corridor. So if your town is just a stop along the way, then nothing smaller than 150 is acceptable in my view. And then everything higher than that, you start to get into some questions about, is there really economic stimulation? Because this is really the gas station experience. So that person is staying for no longer than 10 minutes and then they're back on the road. So how much time is there really to spend money? Some major problems I'm seeing with the market. We need more investment. This is a Tesla installation in Hope, BC. This is actually their second installation in BC because the first one that they had with 8 stalls was completely full. This one is 24 stalls, and they just put this in this summer. This cost them millions of dollars, and this will help enable a lot of electric vehicle travel throughout BC, where it is direly needed because 1 in 6 vehicles is electric in British Columbia. 1 in 6 new vehicles is electric in British Columbia, and Tesla has very high market share. So this is coming from need. Gaps and challenges: too slow, too few, and too troublesome. The charging stations are too slow. This is a picture on the left-hand side of a gentleman who purchased his F-150 Lightning, a pure electric truck, in August, and by September he was trying to sell it because the charging stations, the fast charging stations that he was trying to use, were too slow for him. This middle picture, too few, that's a Petro-Canada installation. They put in 2 fast chargers per site. You can see from the previous slide, Tesla put in 24 per installation. 2 chargers per site is not enough for the future. Once we start seeing BC-like growth, we are going to see congestion at these charging stations, and it's going to really suck for consumers. And too troublesome. Too often I encounter, or I read of encounters of people pulling up to charging stations that are broken, and that is not good. And in fact, that can be a dangerous situation if it's in the middle of winter. So I'm happy to report that Peaks to Prairies and ATCO has maintained our stations at more than 99% uptime throughout their entire life. So what's next for ATCO? We're really getting into energy management. There's a lot of charging stations entering the ecosystem, and we might encounter some capacity bottlenecks. So we do the analysis, engineering, and implementation of energy management solutions to get those charging stations connected to the grid. I have some examples here, but I'm just going to blow through those. And electric fleets. So as I said before, we do conversion studies, we do infrastructure deployment and energy management for those electric fleets that are inevitably coming to the market. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen and give it back to Peter.
Thank you so much, folks. That was a lot of information delivered very, very fast. And I see that there's already questions piling up in the chat. So yeah, let's turn this into a discussion. Nancy, you've been monitoring the questions.
I have been. There's been all kinds of questions and all kinds of answers as well in the chat. So I wouldn't mind, even though some questions may have been answered in the chat, to just address them again for the benefit of everybody. And what I'll do is I will start with the most recent question, which is, do you have any numbers available for Tesla owned and supplied charges versus the other charging standards?
I assume this question is directed to me, and this is how many users of the Peace to Prairies network are Tesla owners?
Yes, I think Paul Salvatore asked the question. So if that's correct, Paul, then yes. Yes, it's correct.
Yeah, it's not something that we are able to determine from the charging station data that's available to us. But I think it probably represents a higher percentage of the market share that's out there. So if Teslas represent 60% of market share, I bet you they represent about 70% of our DC fast charger usage, because Tesla owners tend to tend to have higher performance in colder conditions and higher ranges. So people that want to do road trips often buy that brand of vehicle. So I wouldn't be surprised to hear that our usership of Teslas is in the 70% region. Yeah.
Peter, before we get to your most recent question, I'd like to go right back to one of the first questions, and that is for Fortis and ATCO. How are you planning to deal with or mitigate the enormous costs of upgrading neighborhood transformers across the service areas without passing down the huge costs? And I know that you answered it, but if you could just quickly answer it again for the benefit of everybody.
I mean, like I can, like, so we're talking specifically like about the residential areas, I guess, right?
I think so. Yeah, Peter, I think that you had asked.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
correct. That's one of the big
Neighborhood
concerns from our municipalities is neighborhood transformer upgrades.
Yeah, and so like the way we're looking at it now is the first thing to do is really just to make sure that you're managing the load like on that secondary network as best as possible. So we are looking at implementing a EV managed charging program for next year to get consumers to start to think about shifting their load to a different time where we're not seeing the kind of the concerns that we're hoping we're not going to see as fast as we will. Sooner or later, we're going to have to upgrade the secondary networks transformers anyways. And so we're trying to find a way to best do that where we get consumers to manage on their end with some level of incentive and support. And then when we need to, like we're hoping that in the future, we can find a way to be fairly like economic when we're replacing any sort of secondary network, especially if you're digging a trench in the ground and you got a neighbor that doesn't have an EV today, might have one tomorrow. And so if you're putting a hole in the ground, we're looking at making sure that we can share or keep those costs like into basically one project where we can be more economic and do kind of things all at once, make ready like that EV infrastructure where we don't have to do that year over year. And so it's going to be in a kind of a growing process, and kind of that's how we see it right now, at least.
All right.
Yeah,
another question. Oh, go ahead.
All I'll add to that is that growth in electricity systems is nothing new. The first homes that were built in Alberta had 30 amp services and 60 amp services. And today we see 100 amp and 200 amp services becoming the norm. So I do agree that there with Michael that there are concerns and we do have to manage costs, but the electricity system has been perpetually growing. Air conditioners didn't exist 70 years ago, and now they do. So this is just something that this is business as usual in many ways.
I think, yeah, the biggest thing is making sure that we're not doing it like digging into the ground twice in the same location. And so we want to make sure that we're as economic as possible, so because we don't want to we don't want consumers to have to bear that cost.
Yeah.
What's the approximate cost to install a level 3 charging station?
I kind of answered that. Will, you probably know a little bit more. It's definitely going to vary depending on the speed of that charger. Level a 50 kilowatt charger is going to be considerably cheaper than a 150 or 300 kilowatt charger. I threw in a range of 75,000 plus 150,000, but it probably can go up further if you're looking at the 350. I don't know if you guys know.
Yeah, through our program, just the majority of the level 3s that we're installing are 50 kilowatts. We have a couple hundreds. It's about 96,000 is about average, but it can really vary, like you mentioned in the chat.
Yeah, it's like asking how much does it cost to build a house. Location really matters a lot. So you have the cost of the install, which, as Calvin just said, it's around $100,000 for a 50 kilowatt unit. But there are all sorts of factors, like how far it is away from the available electrical supply. And then there's the grid connection costs from ATCO or Fortis or whoever the local utility is, and that's something you can reach out to us for. It's very hard to say without knowing the specific location how much that grid connection cost will be, and sometimes it's fully investable, so you don't have to pay anything. You just kind of pay it off over time.
Yeah, and you could be looking at, if you're looking at 1 charger, 2 chargers, and if you had 10 chargers, that's, you could. A lot of these networks have managed load. You could basically manage a load like that maxes out that transformer. So you wouldn't be, you'd be reducing the demand on the electrical system by kind of doing that. You would limit, and you would just basically limit the charging if 10 EVs connected kind of all at once. So different options. Very difficult question to answer.
I invite people also to look through the chat. Some questions and comments flying around. Paul, you had a comment about EV charging locations being nice to have them where there is free public parking, where the consumer can spend time as a vehicle charges, proximity to restaurants, shopping and entertainment, that kind of thing. Anybody speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, that was our criteria for Peaks to Prairies when we drove around the southern province and looked for places to put the charging stations. We looked for, the local cluster of restaurants and fast food places. Any kind of new development nowadays where they're doing like a Walmart with, a gas station and a couple fast food restaurants all nearby, there's always going to be some parking, some string of stalls that are off in the kind of lonesome corner. And that's the great spot for the EV charging stations because it's not going to get blocked by a gas vehicle. And there's plenty to do while you charge. And another huge component to what Paul is saying is safety. So put these charging stations in well-lit, high traffic areas so that you reduce your likelihood of vandalism or theft. We do see some charging stations in our network, ATCO's network, where the cables get cut due to copper theft. And so think about safety and security. If you were a person charging at 11 p.m. at night, would you feel comfortable and safe charging here? Because that's how the charging station is going to be used at some point.
Yeah, I think one thing I'll add is, like, as a consumer, if I'm traveling anywhere, I think destination charging is extremely important. I want to be able to like go to a location and go to a hotel and know that they're going to have ample charging for me when I get there, and not have to worry about really expensive level 3 charging that might be kind of in that area. And I think that's a really good opportunity for different facilities. Hotels being a great one where they have that feature that EV owners are looking for. So
There's been a couple of questions, comments about battery life as it relates to climate. Perhaps somebody could address that for everyone.
I'm an EV owner for 4 years. My battery is doing fine, and I drive it in -40 and -50. I get less range, but my battery's doing fine.
Yeah, I think it's an educational component that anybody who's buying an EV just needs to consider. Is if it's -30, you'll have to adjust your range accordingly. And the vehicles are fairly good at letting you know what that range is going to be before you head out. But
And I think just to add, once we have a more fulsome EV charging network, just the redundancy in the system that if, for whatever reason you do need to stop, it's an emergency and you need a charge, once that network is more built out, there'll be more options for you. So that redundancy will help mitigate any issues.
Here's a point for clarification. If a customer requires a service upgrade to accommodate a level 2 home charge, does Fortis or ATCO fund that upgrade, or does the homeowner fund the required upgrades?
That should be a last resort. There are so many alternatives to a service upgrade before you have to call ATCO or Fortis. So for instance, you can dial down the output of the level 2 charger in the home. So for example, a typical level 2 home charger has an output of 40 amps. You can dial that all the way down to 10 amps. And if you are not a heavy driver, that will completely suit your needs because your vehicle is parked for many, many hours, like 12 hours overnight. So that's option 1. Option 2 is what's known as a electric vehicle energy management device. And this basically is allowed by code. The Canadian Electrical Code allows this. And it looks to see if your electrical panel is heavily loaded. And if it is, it won't allow it to charge the car. And if it isn't, it will charge the car. And this is a great alternative to a service panel upgrade. ATCO does not fund the upgrade. If the home is already built, we've already invested in that service. So at this moment, if the homeowner would like to do an upgrade, then that will be entirely at their cost.
yeah, and Fortis is the same way. We did put forward a business case for our cost of service business case that looked at upgrading secondary networks when consumers did go over that limit and needed to upgrade their panel. But like Will's comment, I think everybody should be focused on making sure that they can manage the load at their house as best they can. And that's kind of a last resort if they need to. There are things that we're looking at in the future, but the biggest thing that I see is I don't necessarily want to be upgrading just one person's secondary like cable that goes to their house to our transformer, when in the same trench there's multiple customers that have kind of potentially upgrades that they're going to need in the future as well. So we're trying to find ways to manage around that and making sure we're optimizing that as best we can.
I invite you to look in the chat. There are a couple of links to websites as it relates to training around mechanics and so on as it relates to electric vehicles. What's the future of the towing capacity for EV pickup trucks? Will towing range improve as electric engines improve? Can you gear a pickup truck to improve towing efficiency?
I don't know if any of us are qualified to answer this, but
I have some thoughts on it.
I mean, so I think electric vehicles have very, very good, great torque. I think that the difference is how much that's going to degrade the range over that when you're towing something. So you might lose more range, but Will, here, I'll let you answer.
So the market right now isn't focused on addressing the towers of the world. If you look at the statistics of towing, 75% of truck owners in North America tow once a year or less, meaning never. So right now, the industry is really focused at getting trucks in the hands of people that just need a truck. And that's what the battery size is suited for. And that's what the range is suited for. I have no doubt that Ford can make a truck that can tow a 15,000 pound trailer, 600 or 700 kilometers on a single charge. It's just a matter of how big a battery that requires. And will somebody pay $200,000 for that truck? So right now the market is going to address the low-hanging fruit first, and then it'll start addressing those corner cases of heavy duty towers. So it's coming, it's just not coming right away. So if you think about Ford's goal, they want to get as many trucks as possible out to the market. Today's F-150 Lightning extended range has 130 kilowatt hour battery. They bumped that up to like 260 or something like that. That means they can only sell one F-150 instead of two. So that guy can tow, sure, but they missed out on 2 sales. So
yeah, it comes down to the cost of the battery, like Will's saying.
Yeah.
If you want to increase that range because you're towing something, you're going to have to make sure you improve the battery capacity.
Kelvin, you had
every vehicle is going to see a penalty from towing. It's just physics. Yeah.
Kelvin, you had a question for ATCO and Fortis as it relates to flexible rates for EV charging. Care to expand on that? Has that been answered to your satisfaction through the discussion?
I haven't answered it. I could probably, I know, I tried to kind of talk about, what we're doing for rates, but in terms of like, this is a fairly big issue right now, especially if you're in a town and you just want a level 3 charger to support people going through the community. And so if there's, one electric vehicle that connects and charges just once for that month, there's a fairly significant cost just to operate it, just because of the demand rate. And so ATCO has a rate there, D23, that Fortis is looking at doing something very similar, where we're offering lower rates for the instances where you do have only a few vehicles that are charging. And as you get more, that might become more expensive, but the ability to then flip to a commercial rate that makes a lot more sense. And so we're approaching that right now. And I don't know if it's been approved. We did submit it, I guess, but definitely something we're very focused on.
A comment on, oh, go ahead, sorry.
And I was just gonna, and that's, I think, a stepping stone to better rates potential in the future that make more sense. So I think it'll be an iterative process.
So if a person buys an electric vehicle today, will it be worthless in 2 years if the range changes, if it's over 1,000 kilometers on average?
My previous vehicle got me 400 kilometers just because of the, it was a 4-cylinder, but it was not great on gas. And so for me, the range is fairly similar. So I think it depends on the consumer.
Yeah, I think, okay, so there's 2 things to this question that Peter posed. So battery energy density, according to Bloomberg BNEF, is improving by about 5% per year. So yeah, every year the range that you get out of the same size battery is improving by about 5%. So I remember in the days of like the iPhone 3GS, when the iPhone 4 was around the corner, and then the iPhone 5, we started to see this kind of like upgrade dilemma where people were in like a rapidly improving upgrade cycle, and that can kind of cause some consumer hesitation, especially with such a large purchase that a vehicle is. I think the bigger question though to me is, if you buy a gas vehicle today, what's the value going to be like on that? And that's what I'm more worried about. If the whole world is switching to electric, what are gas vehicles going to be worth? If you bought a brand new 2023 whatever SUV, what is that going to be worth in 8 years? I'm willing to bet, just like flat screen TVs, the way they replaced TVs before it, I think that's what you're going to see. So I'm really scared about that. That depreciation is actually scarier to me than this question of buying today's EV or tomorrow's EV.
And maybe just to expand on that too, I'm not sure manufacturers are just going to be infinitely increasing range. I think there's kind of an inflection point where, if we hit say 500, 600 kilometers as the average range, I would imagine it would be in their best interest to just aim to build on scale and drop the cost of that battery and that vehicle overall, rather than either maintaining the price and starting to inflate the battery size, just so that we can say we have an EV that's, 1200, has a 1200 kilometer range.
But it really comes down to the impact of the consumer as well. For somebody who lives in the city or travels within that city 95% of the time, and then travels 5% of the time, they're commuting or they're traveling to a location that's 1,000 kilometers away. You're only really impacted that small portion of time. And so
of your ownership. The answer to this is not bigger batteries, it's more infrastructure, as Calvin was saying. So more better infrastructure.
Any other questions? Have I missed anything in the chat? I don't think so. A lot of questions have been answered in the chat. I think we've covered the high points. Anything further? Seeing none. Peter?
Peter's on.
Oh,
Peter
I was
is muted. Yeah.
I was muted the whole time, wasn't I? Yeah. I was saying nice things. Thank you, Nancy, for moderating today and for hosting on behalf of the staff, and for our speakers for giving up your lunch break today to share your knowledge and wisdom with us. It's exciting times, and it's sometimes feel like we're all riding a cart downhill, barely keeping the wheels on. But it's going to be very interesting to see how things progress. And I've personally been grateful for all three of your organizations and the help that you've given to our municipalities down south here on this particular issue. For the EDA, Nancy, important announcements. The ministry dinner, I see we have 8 seats left.
Yes,
October 20th.
and they're going quickly today. So I haven't looked recently, but I bet you we have 6 left now. And so if you want to take part in our ministry dinner, please register, today, register now, because they're going fast. We sell out every year. So, and this is our first time in person in a couple of years. So everybody will be eager to, to shake hands and to have FaceTime with important folks from the government of Canada and the government of Alberta to talk about your projects, to network, to share ideas, form partnerships. It's a great event.
Mm-hmm. And our next webinar, Nancy, when is that and what's the topic?
Our next webinar is next week, and we're talking about intellectual property. What is intellectual property as it relates to businesses? How do you protect it? And we're talking with somebody from the government of Canada, from the Intellectual Property Office, who will be talking about resources that are available to help you make those definitions, as well as figure out ways to protect your ideas.
And people can buy tickets to our conference coming up next spring, where they can be in person with Fortis and ATCO and the MCCAC as well.
That's right. Yes, everything is open. We are looking for partners. We are looking for speakers. And we have an interesting component this year where we are going to be inviting some youth to take part in our conference. So the economic developers of tomorrow will have an opportunity to network online and that kind of thing. And yeah, registration is open. And if I were you, I would book my room at the Palmori Mountain Lodge, because as we learned last year, it sells out pretty quickly.
Yeah, and the Nordic Spa books up really fast too.
It really does, yes.
Awesome.
It's a great perk.
Perfect. We are right on time, coming into 1 o'clock here in just a few seconds. So thank you so much. Everybody have a great day and enjoy the sunshine this afternoon before fall starts to hit.
Thank you. You will be getting an email with a link to this recording, as well as the copies of the presentations. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.